So my name's Matt Wright, and I'm the CTO at Stitched. And Stitched is a CRM system which is built entirely on graph databases. So we don't have any other store of data except graph. I'm going to talk to you about three things today. I'm going to talk about what makes us happy in our jobs, and then I'm going to talk about how graphs and social network theory play a little bit of a part in that. And then I'm going to talk about how we built a CRM system based entirely on graph. So a little bit about me. My background is in investment banking. I did sort of 10 years in investment banking, and I ran teams in the front office in credit derivatives and equity derivatives. And I managed teams of teams and ran big projects. And I've seen my sort of fair share of hiring and firing and disaster. And I just think we can probably do this whole process a lot better. So while I was preparing for this talk, I came across this fascinating statistic, and it's this. Apparently, 50% of people are unhappy in their jobs. And so I looked into this, and I did a bunch of research. And it kind of comes down to one basic thing. It's mostly this. It's not Kevin Spacey. It's mostly fear. It's sort of fear of change and fear of uncertainty and fear of other people and fear of being laid off and fear of finance and fear of control and fear of losing control. And, you know, we sometimes fear ourselves. Someone once told me, if you don't like your job, you should just leave, which is very easy to say, but not so easy to do. So what I thought would be far more interesting is to talk about the 50% that actually really enjoy their jobs, and how does that work? So I wanted to share another image, and I went to Google Images, and I typed in happy teams, and I got this image. They're lying to us, right? That's absolutely not what a happy team looks like. That looks like a bunch of people that got together one afternoon and took a load of Prozac, and a photographer took some pictures of them. And this is the sort of corporate cheese that we're used to, right? So I did some more research, and I looked a bit further, and I looked at some startup pictures and all sorts of different pictures of teams. And then I found one particular picture that I wanted to share with everybody, and because it kind of really stood out. I found these guys. So look at their faces. They're genuinely happy, right? You can totally tell they're having a great time. They have genuine fear as well. If you stuff this up, you're dead. So why are they happy? Well, I carried on researching, and I found this really fantastic talk by this guy called Dan Pink. I don't know whether anybody's seen this talk, but he sort of thinks that there are three things that make us happy in our jobs, and they're these: purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So we need to believe in something. We need to believe that we're there for a reason. We need to have autonomy. We don't want to be micromanaged. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. And in the age of like a knowledge worker, you know, creativity is a big part of our jobs. And to be creative, we need to be autonomous. And mastery. Everybody likes getting better at something. You know, this is why people play guitar all weekend, because it feels good to get better at something. And I think also the people aspect is really important. We want to go on a journey with other people. So, what would this look like if we kind of transferred it to our working world? Well, I scanned back through all of the projects that I've worked on, and I found one that kind of resonated with all of these themes, and it's a sort of an unlikely story of happiness from investment banking and the front office. So, I was lucky enough when I was at RBC to be on this project called the European Government Bond Project, and we had a very clear purpose. We had to build this bond trading system by the 19th of December, and we'd promised to the German and Spanish finance ministers we'd sort of be in the game. So super clear purpose, not as exciting as rock climbing, you know, but it's nice to have a purpose. And the rest of the story, it's not really my story, it's someone else's story. So I had this guy, and he came to work for us, and he was a super cynical contractor. And he'd had the crap beaten out of him for ages. And it could say, we gathered everybody together at the beginning of the project, and we sort of said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And he was just like, there's no way you guys are going to pull this off. And over the course of the project, you know, things changed. And on the management team, we were really big believers in autonomy. So we gave people room to move. And this guy, you know, the mastery part, you know, well, it was a slightly boring part of the project, but it was uber critical, and he got really into it. And he got better and better and better, and he really enjoyed it. And so at the end of the project, you know, that was great. And I always remember that part, but I remember one part more specifically. Right at the end of the project, we had everybody around for some drinks to sort of say, yes, we've made it, awesome. And this guy's wife was there, And she came up to me and she said, I just want to say thanks very much. And I was sort of like, what for? And she said, well, he's really enjoyed working on this project and he's had a few crappy projects, and so he's been really enjoying working with you guys and he's been so much happier, and he's also been really happier at home, so I just wanted to say thanks very much. And when you're a hiring manager, those are the things that you remember. So I started learning recently about social network theory, and once I started reading about this stuff, I realized, hey, this sort of thing has a name, and there's tons of theory that we can apply to make ourselves happier in our jobs or to understand how we're connected. So I hope everybody's kind of settled in and had their coffee, because we're going to do a little bit of graph theory now. Right, so first one. There's this thing called diffusion, and it basically means that you can pass emotion and behavior through a network. So our example was passing, we had a bunch of happy people, and some happiness got passed to, you can pass it to someone that you've never met, which is fantastic. It's awesome if you're an optimist like me. So everybody's heard of this thing, the 6 degrees of separation, the Bacon effect, but there's this other principle called the 3 degrees of influence. And that means that we can influence our friends, and our friends of friends, and our friends of friends of friends, which is really interesting. If you're in a miserable network, misery also spreads, so watch out for that one. Here's another one. So we've got a couple of groups of people. We've got one on the right-hand side and one on the left-hand side. These are called components in network theory, and there's someone in the middle. And this is called a local bridge, because they sort of bridge the two worlds. So this represents a bit of a moral dilemma. There's 2 things you can do here if you like. One, you can keep all the people apart. And we recognize people that do this with sentences like, I will represent IT on the trading floor, and all information will come through me for the benefit of everybody. And another version of this that we recognize really clearly is, do not send anybody any emails unless they come to me first. And this is kind of like the negative approach. It creates power because it creates information that only flows through one person. But what would happen if we kind of brought everybody together? Well, we come to another bit of network theory, and this is called centrality. Centrality is your measure of how close you are to the middle of a network. So if you bring people together, your centrality goes up, and information naturally comes to you. So we hear sentences like, hey, you should definitely go and talk to Mike. He's a great guy, he knows all the things, he'll introduce you to the right people, and that's a much more positive message. Centrality is great for passing network around a tight group of people. So it sort of says cooperation and sharing win, which I personally like. So quick snippets there of some networking theory. So what happens, if we think this theory is really important to us in the way that we work, what happens when we join someone else's network, or we have someone join our network? So how does the whole kind of job process work? Well, last bit of theory is this thing called the strength of weak ties. So when we look for a job, the best people to talk to are on the edge of our network. And that seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive to start with, but these people have access to information that we don't necessarily have. People who are close to us have access roughly to the same level of information that we do. So this is interesting, and you would sort of think, well, who are the perfect people that have the loose connections between loads of different people and loads of different organizations and roles, and this is where recruitment should sort of step in. So we expect recruitment people to be really good at this. So a little story about recruiters. I've spent quite a lot of time with recruitment people over the last 18 months, and I've learned quite a few things. Some of them I thought I'd share. I think the best way to share this is a little bit of a story. So just cast your minds back to when you were 23. Remember how you knew everything. You decide that you're going to become a recruitment consultant. Most people that decide this, they're personable people, they have high IQ, they like people, they're resilient, some are functioning alcoholics. So that's okay, you join this company, right? And it kind of plays to your strengths in one way because you're a people person. So you learn about how to talk to people and how to take roles and requirements and these sorts of things. sometimes there's a technical aspect to the job. So let's take some of my stuff from my past. Let's say you're recruiting for a investment banking role. So you need to know maybe about JavaScript. JavaScript goes with Angular. Angular is a newer form. Maybe you need to talk about jQuery. Maybe you need to talk about Angular. Backbone, React, possibly Handlebar. Handlebar is a weird form of JavaScript, but there you go. You may need to know that. If you're talking about C++, you need to know about Boost and MFC. If you're talking about MFC, when you talk about C++, you need to talk about it on Windows. Windows versus Linux is a different thing. Also, you need to know about investment banking. So you need to know what a collateralized debt obligation is. That's a CDO. You need to know what a CDS is. That is a credit default swap. Also, you need to know what a bond is and a swap is. And also, you need to combine them. So when I say cache equity, I mean low latency, on-premise, execution, Java, multi-threading. When I say equity derivatives, I mean batch processing, grid computing, and caching. Everybody's cool, yeah? This is your first day. So also on your first day, you don't have access to any of the firm's contacts, and you know nobody in the industry. But the best is yet to come. You also need to learn to program. So this is taken directly from a content management system that serves 350,000 recruiters. This has millions and millions and millions of CVs on it, right? And this is how people search through our CVs. So on top of all of the things that we learned, that we have to learn, you also need to know regular expressions, Boolean logic, and pattern matching. So I was pretty shocked when I found this out, right? And it's little wonder that we end up with this sort of crap. Because it's just too hard. It's way too hard. So what does good look like? I think good looks a bit like this. Doesn't everybody know who this guy is? It's for those that don't know, it's Ari Gold from the show Entourage. If you haven't seen it, you should go and check it out. It's good. So why do I think he's good? So he's a Hollywood agent. He knows all of the actors in town. He knows the studios, the backstories, the politics, who goes with who. He knows what a good script looks like. And he puts the whole thing together nicely so that it all sort of works. And that's kind of how we think recruitment should work. Well, that's how I think recruitment should work. But the problem is, there's a big gap between Ari Gold and our 23-year-olds. So how do we fill that gap? Well, ideally, you'd sort of download Ari's brain into a computer and save all of his domain knowledge and all of his contacts and let everybody have access to it. And that's basically what we've tried to do with Stitched. So it's sort of Ari's brain in a computer. So what I thought we would do is actually do a little bit of recruitment while we're here. So this is a role, sort of a former colleague of mine, and this is a sort of description. This one's actually directly from LinkedIn. So got an exciting new role, super exciting, credit derivatives, and we're looking for C# people, and they have experience in grid computing and caching. So bear in mind, this is your first day. So go. So we're going to do it. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a little a live demo. So we're actually not live on the laptop, live to the internet. And so fingers crossed for the demo gods. So the first thing we want to do is go and have a look at some of the skills that we might need for this. So let's start with credit derivatives. Okay, right. So what have we got here? Well, we've got a few sort of things that go with credit derivatives. We've got a little bit of a description, and what we're trying to do here is sort of get people to learn about the skills and the skills that relate to the skills. Okay, so let's have a look at one of them. Let's have a look at a CDS. This is a credit default swap, and this is super standard credit stuff. Go back, CTO squared. I used to build these. They blew up the world. It's the credit crunch. Yeah, avoid these. They're bad. Let's look at something more technical. So grid computing. Right, so here are a few examples. So what we've done here is we've built up an ontology, and an ontology is just a graph concept where you just sort of say, hey, A goes with B, B is a type of C, C is a part of D, and you can build up these neat little structures that they take a skill or anything, and they describe the things that are around those skills. And you can build them either manually, or you can kind of get a bit of machine learning magic to sort of teach you what might the ontology look like. Okay, so let's go have a look at the hiring manager. So there's a people aspect to this as well. Okay, so this was our hiring manager, remember? So we have a little bit of information on him. We know that he's at RBS, that's the one that we're recruiting for now. And he also used to work at Dresdner. So one piece of information we have here is that he worked with this guy called Rob Porter. Now, another thing that we've done inside Stitched is built a whole social network. So you can kind of say who's worked with who, how they've worked with each other, whether they reported to, blah, however that works, you know, all of the working world's connections, you can add them yourself. So, well, we've got something else going on over here on the right-hand side. And this is a recommendation engine. You know, I think you probably heard a bit about that today. And what is a recommendation engine? Well, you can take two facts and you can infer a third fact. So we've got two facts here. One fact is that we know that Paul and Rob used to work together. And a second fact is that we know that Ian and Rob used to work together. So maybe Paul and Ian used to, you know, work together. So you could ring Paul up and say, hey, do you know Ian Harris? And he will say, oh, I know the Harris, of course. He's a genius. So we can add this relationship. Great thing about graphs is, once you add one little bit of information, you can infer a load of other information. Now, I've had to sort of redact some of the names because this is actually a live system, and we're using, this is thankfully one of our customers has sort of like lent us the data that we can use today. So these are all movie stars, but you'll soon, you know, this stuff is very accurate. It's based on this principle of triadic closure, which sort of says, if we know A and B, then we can infer C. So that's great. So we've built up a little bit of a profile around the hiring manager. So let's go and have a look at a search. So we also built a search engine. This is all graph stuff. So let's add the things that we're looking for, credit derivatives. What else? Grid computing, and I've forgotten already. Caching, right, cool. Great. Okay, so we've found some people. So let's have a look at what we did there. So we used our ontology. These are the things that we actually looked for. So remember we looked at our ontology before, which was a way of relating skills together. Well, we actually looked for all of these things instead of just credit derivatives, grid computing, and caching technology. And that's a sort of super simple concept, but it's really, really powerful. So let's have a look at some of the results. Okay, this is good. So there's a bunch of machine learning magic going on in the background to sort of say, well, actually we know that they used the skills recently. That's kind of important as well, and there's a few other metrics. But suffice to say that, you know, just finding C# and coherence at the bottom of someone's CV is no good. It has to have some relevance. So having a look in their CV. Okay, so this is looking good because we looked at the credit derivative. We haven't got credit derivatives mentioned here, but we've found sort of CDOs and CDSs and, you know, this type of thing. And the grid, so, you know, this is not a bad shout for calling someone. Right, let's have a look at the second one. Same sort of thing. Yeah, that's looking roughly right. Nice ontology use. So let's go back and add our hiring manager into it. So this is doing an ontological search and a social network search at the same time. I think we might be the first people to do this. So let's have a look. So Daniel Day-Lewis has sort of moved to 3, and Reese Witherspoon have moved to sort of 3 and 4. They were our 1 and 2 before. And we've got 2 new people in 1 and 2. So let's see why that is. Okay, nicely done. Well, there's a little social network going on here. Because we know that Paul now works with Ian, well, Ian has worked with Kate Blanchett before. So, and let's have a look to see if Kate has the skills. Okay, so some C#, that's good. But a similar set of skills. So this is good. Now we can use this to, you know, recruitment's just a detective story. So it's not to say that this is the best person for the role, but it helps us on our search. You know, we can give any one of these people a call to sort of say, oh, do you know that Paul is recruiting? Do you want to go and work with him again? So using a, you know, First, what we're trying to do is basically allow for kind of imperfect knowledge on the candidate side, imperfect knowledge on the hiring manager side, and imperfect knowledge on the recruitment side, and try and bring the things together. Okay, so back to the presentation. So why would we use Neo4j for this? Well, I think we're getting there. So the ontology concept, it's a graph, if you want to relate skills and things together. If you want to build a social network, Neo4j is great at doing that. Relationships, as we've heard many times today, it's the bedrock of new data. So a recommendation engine, if you want to say A and B related to each other and guess, Neo4j is perfect for that. Graphs are great. If you want to do a search between two shortest paths, people, skills, graph problem again. And the visualization is really important as well. I think visualization is an interesting one because if you have an uber massive graph, I'm not sure you get that much value. But if you can figure out a really small little chunky picture, you can get some really neat insights out of it. And why Neo4j? Well, the technology is super fast. We did a live demo on the internet. It's quick. It's reliable. It's well supported. And Jim always buys beers at the meetups. So I've talked a lot about why we would do this. If people want to know how we do it, we're quite happy to have a little chat over a beer. This is a quick architecture slide. So we have Neo4j as a hosted instance. We use Docker and Linode to have a multi-tenanted setup. We use Heroku to bind everything together. Ruby's really good at that. And we're super heavy users of Angular, as everybody is these days. So the whole thing looks sort of smooth and responsive. So there's sort of 3 points to summarize. The first thing we talked about was that happiness is about going on the right journey with people, so connecting together is important. I think graph theory can help us out on that journey. And I think recruitment can fundamentally be improved by bringing together some of this imperfect knowledge, and graphs are great for that. So a quick couple of thank yous. I want to thank Neo4j because we're quite an early stage company, so it's really nice to be able to come and talk and share what we've done with everybody. I want to thank the team. They're sort of down here in the front. You used to have to be Google to build sort of stuff like this, and we're like a bunch of guys, super small team. So I want to thank Marcus and Ian and Richard, Felix, Sarah, and Chris. I've really enjoyed our journey for the last, we've been doing this for about a year, and I'm really looking forward to the next year. So thanks everybody for listening to a talk on recruitment. And if we can help you out on your journey through Graphland, then yeah, come chat to us. Thanks.